Everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here, as always, with Andrew Vontz of the Choose the Hard Way podcast and newsletter. You can talk about that in a second. TheBetterLab.io. Andrew, it's opening weekend of the classics. I feel like we're getting old. I feel like we just talked about how I don't like how excited people get about opening weekend, and then everyone's burned out by Flanders and no one's watching it. But before we get into that and a few other news items, do you want to talk about your new Substack?
Yeah, and we have some really incredible news about a star writer that we are big fans of who's going to be back this weekend. So just a little cliffhanger here. Somebody really big is coming back into the world tour this weekend, and we can't wait to talk about them. Something I'm perhaps even more excited about, though, as Spencer mentioned, is my Substack. You can find it at alwaysthehardway.substack.com or just search for Choose the Hard Way on Substack. You can also follow me at HardwayPod on Instagram, where I have links. My Substack is about bikes, Zen, and life, and I'm often writing about those topics as well as giving you my thoughts about the interviews I have over on the Choose the Hard Way podcast, which I recently relaunched with an interview with Harry Sweeney that I think what he shares is pretty incredible. So please come check me out. And if you haven't downloaded it, please get the Better Lab. If you want to sleep better and train better, the Better Lab is your solution. You can find it in the Apple App Store for free. So Spencer, maybe should we just jump to the biggest news up front here and talk about the return of Taco van der Hoorn?
You spoiled it. I was going to say, I got a message yesterday from a loyal listener that just said, Andrew's boy Taco starting this weekend. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out he was referring to the man named Taco van der Hoorn, not Andrew's boy Taco, which I wasn't quite sure what that meant. But yes, Taco is back on the start line. This is big for you. Here's an even piece of bigger news. I just found this out a minute ago. Not his first race of the year. He raced Tour Down Under and the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race.
Clearly in stealth mode. I want to give Tim Woods a shout out here. Tim, thanks for writing in with this information about Taco. I don't know how we missed this. That Taco had been out
of it just slipped through our fingers.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Well, I think the big question is Taco's edge was always his equipment. This guy was probably on like 125 cranks like 3 years ago. He was running like 15 centimeter bars. His hands were basically touching every time he was in the drops. What is he going to do now to stand out? Because, clearly is someone who was relying on aerodynamics, not so much on the engine. Although we do know he put in that big bike packing tour in New Zealand prior to, I guess, the Tour Down Under, which makes a lot of sense. So he's got a little bit of that spirit of gravel sprinkled on. Dylan Johnson recently said gravel spirit is dead. And I think that Taco proves that's not actually true. You can talk to Alejandro Valverde about that as well. Out there winning those UCI early season gravel races at like 50.
Not only did Dylan Johnson say gravel spirit was dead, he was like celebrating it, dancing on its grave.
Yeah,
Dylan, I applaud you. Thank you for standing up and celebrating the death of gravel. Couldn't have been happier reading that. Brave man, bold man. Yeah, Taco. Well, I would say the bigger problem, other than the engine and concerns about the rest of the Peloton adopting his advantages, he just has not raced for a while. He had a TBI.
Yeah.
I want to say 2023, perhaps.
Right.
Tour of Flanders 2023. Hasn't raced a ton since then. I am seeing he did win a small race last year, like a race that we would do in the Netherlands. I'm just going to click on this. I bet there's like 200 people. Yeah, my God, they get a lot of people at their local races. But did the Tour of Guangxi, did pretty well for someone just coming back. But I don't know. Yeah, up-road hill for Taco. 31 years old, never the biggest engine, coming back from serious injury. On a serious note, I'm sure you're familiar with all these stories of people. Remember Roland Green? He was like the world's best mountain biker. Yeah,
yes,
hit his
I
head.
Do. Yeah.
And they don't fully understand why, but he could never push the same watts as before.
That's what happened to him. I thought he just wouldn't take EPO.
I don't want to speak out of school, but
Yeah. Okay.
trust me when I say that was not the problem. I've heard some stories.
All right. Fair enough. So we've got Taco back in the game. And, I mentioned cranks, but I want to transition here. What do you think about these rumors that, they may not be rumors. It sounds like there's some pretty precise estimates that Jonas is on 150 cranks.
Oh, I was hoping you hadn't read this. I was going to surprise you with this. Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah. I could go take those cranks off my son's bike, basically, who's 8.
Well, I would say this is one of the better pieces I've read on cycling news for a long time. I hate to give free ads out, but pretty informative, actually. So they don't make, if you're hearing this and you're going to run out and buy 150 cranks, they don't make them. So these are custom made cranks. Also, cycling news went up to the bike and measured the cranks themselves. So
Wow.
impressive
Okay.
right there. Another thing that I thought was interesting in that piece is it was maybe one of the sports scientists for Visma saying the advantage of the short crank. I need to learn a little bit more about this before I start spouting about it with confidence. So I have no confidence. Footnote that you can essentially push a bigger gear because the lever is shorter. This is like the opposite. Someone was telling me that the other day they bought 175 cranks because Lance said to buy long cranks. And I do remember Lance and Johan were big into this. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. Guess we didn't know what we were talking about. Oops. Who would have thought? But because it's shorter, you can spin faster on a bigger gear. I think it is harder at the point of turn is more
Right.
pressure on your knee. That might be why you're seeing a lot of knee injuries. But the sports scientist was saying, yeah, this is great. But imagine it's like doing half of a bicep curl. But imagine you only did half bicep curls. You would really shorten your muscle. You would have a lot of weird problems if you didn't do the full range of motion all the time. So I think they were saying they can't ride these all the time because they're too powerful. Like they would shorten
Whoa.
Jonas's muscles if they did that.
So he's going to be swapping crank links throughout the year. This sounds like a
Yeah.
recipe for
We need to
a
look
knee
into this
injury.
a little bit more. But yeah, it did make me think like, man, this has got to be really funky on your knees to be doing.
All right. I'm making a note here. I'm going to need to talk to an orthopedist about this. That's an interesting theory, Spencer, that might be part of why we've seen so many knee injuries out of competition.
Yeah, because you think how short your lever is. Like,
Yeah.
What do you ride? 175, 180, something like
I
that?
ride 175s.
Yeah, and it's just easier because your lever is really long. But what if that was shorter? It's like, sure, you could spin at 5311 and you're putting out 500 watts, but that's a lot of compression at the top of that pedal stroke.
Yeah, I
when you're
want
trying to push down.
Right. I wonder if it's the patellar tendon that is where they're getting tendonitis, because I'm imagining from what you're describing with your scientific analysis that
It's so confident.
yeah. Wow, that's wild. Man, I can't wait to look into this now. Well, while we're talking about technology, I don't know what's going on, but the aggregators on the internet are just going wild for Sepp Van Mark content. Have you noticed this trend? Like every week, this guy's coming in. Kenny's cutting in. He's got a hot take. Like every week. This week, he said his new theory. I actually think that this makes sense. That if we want to make world tour racing and bike racing in general safer, he said, let's limit the information that riders can have on their screens. I know it's been argued that it's safer now because the riders can look at the route and see what's coming up. But in his view, riders are spending too much time looking at the screen, moving the route around. And when they're looking down, he thinks the potential for them to overlap wheels and wreck is much higher.
I agree with this, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know. If everyone's staring at their computer, aren't your eyes by definition not on the wheels in front of you?
Yeah, I mean his analogy was it's like people driving around looking at TikTok.
Yeah, little.
Yeah,
I would say that's a 1-for-1, but I could go with them there maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that I'm really curious about is how are these pro cyclists getting routes that actually work on their device? Because I think Spencer, as we discovered in Tucson, these routes simply don't work. The main thing that these routes do is send you off route. Maybe that's why we saw that that split finish recently.
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't record a show last week. You were traveling. I had food poisoning. Not fun. I did get to listen to your Harry Sweeney interview in bed though, which was an experience with a fever dream Harry Sweeney interview. But yeah, we saw people just go off route. This could be what happened. I don't think I talked to you about this. Did Ghana get robbed of a stage win?
Yeah, I absolutely
the man
think.
Followed the route
let the guy win. Yeah, I think he absolutely is the winner. Maybe this is pro cycling's version of backcountry skiing. They're going off piste there at the finish. You know,
that was so dangerous. By the way, there's people standing there like spectators, and they're riding through them at like 60K an hour. Oh my god! They one rider was like, well, yeah, I would like the other riders would have been mad if Ghana would have got the win because someone won the sprint. I'm like, well, how can you win a sprint when there's no finish line? Like you're just not on route. Like if you go off route and I did this climb really fast, it's like, well, that's just fundamentally not where the race was going. You know what? I actually, on a serious note, I wonder, they must have someone on the team like Patrick Bro going through and like selecting, like building the route basically on their own GPS files, maybe on Strava, and then sending that to their, don't make a mistake, don't click the wrong way because they're going to get a little U-turn in there that everyone's going to be flipping a U-turn in the middle of the Peloton. Or that is a good point, Andrew. Like, what mapping are they using and how are they getting that so accurate? Because if you've ever used that on your computer, it can sometimes not be great.
All right, I'm going to reach a bit deeper into the past. And one other thing I wanted to say, going back to the top of the show, if you would like to support more world-class content, which is hopefully what I'm going to be producing, the number one thing that you can do is to subscribe to my Substack. That's why I mentioned it at the top of the show. So please go to alwaysthehardway.substack.com or just search for Choose the Hard Way on Substack. That will help me bring you more podcasts, interviews with people like Harry Sweeney, and more writing. So please do that. I'd really appreciate it. What I also would appreciate, Spencer, is if we could talk about something that we missed a couple of weeks ago. Again, maybe this was in one of the interstitial weeks, but there was an incident where Brandon McNulty wrecked in a right-hand turn and went through the guardrail on a mountain descent. I don't remember which race this was in. Maybe it was in Valencia.
Like recently or in the past?
Yeah. No, I feel like this just happened a couple of weeks ago.
I don't know if I saw this. I
know what?
Right off the road in the mountains, though.
All right. I may. Okay.
Wait, wait, you're right. You're right. This was at. Wait, what the heck? Was it? Wasn't it the Vuelta last year?
All right. I will say I was watching Lantern Rouge videos on autoplay on Zwift, so it's totally possible. There was I remember one time in the 80s, we were at my grandma's house in Hastings, Nebraska, the town where Kool-Aid was invented.
Your grandma lives in Hastings, Nebraska?
She did. Rest in peace, Grandma. Whoa. Yeah, that's where my dad's from. And you didn't know my dad's from Hastings?
I did not know that. That's where that was the closest town, like with a mall, to where I grew up. So we would drive.
Whoa! No way!
Yeah, and they had a McDonald's. McDonald's once a week up there. Oh man.
Yeah.
Hastings. Man, I haven't thought about that town for a minute.
Yeah, a couple of great Runza locations up there.
Yeah, I actually did, coming back from the Quad Cities weekend a few years ago. I said I had to stop. I don't think Hastings, because it's not on the highway. Kearney's the one on the highway. Yeah, got to go to Runza there.
Kearney's the big city. Yeah, we could go deep. Anyhow, we're watching the Huskers play Go Big Red, and Grandma left the room, and someone scored a touchdown. She came back in like 5 minutes later while the replay was on. It was the player's name was Turner. Someone out there will know. I'm sure this was some famous Cornhusker. And she just kept screaming, "Go Turner, go! Go Turner, go!" So maybe I had a "Go Turner, go" moment with McNulty. But like when I saw it while I was on Zwift, I was like, oh my God, he went through the guardrail again. And then it just made me think about, okay, even if he didn't do it again recently, I just like, how do you come back from that? Like, once you go through a guardrail and fly off of a mountain, I mean, unless you're like goldfish level, you can just like do a Men in Black wipe at the end of the day, which actually I think a lot of these World Tour cyclists might be capable of that. That's a pretty intense experience to have. And then like get back on the race and keep going down the mountain.
I can't believe they finished. Yeah, you like finished the race.
Yeah, just get back on,
Yeah, get
right?
back on. Go. Don't worry about it. Oh, and Andrew, on the topic of your Substack, since you mentioned it, the Harry Sweeney interview answered a big mystery for us about the Isla 2000 versus Andorra. Why was he going to Isla 2000 for camps? Because he previously lived in Nice, moved to Andorra. Isla 2000 is a ski resort close to Nice, so that explains what's going on there. Living pretty high, like 6,600, and then no longer as the altitude tent because he moved into the penthouse and he can't seal the ceiling in the same way he could at his previous hovel. But yeah, a lot of interesting info in there.
Well, and we also discovered that he's descending quite a bit at the beginning of every ride, and then he's climbing back up. So he is training a bit lower, except for the climbs.
Yeah, I think by nature, a lot of people have said this about Andorra. Like if you rent a high apartment, then everything's below you pretty much. So you descend down to like 3,000 feet to train. I mean, that's probably the better situation. God, it would be hard to get me out of Nice if I was a pro. Like, I'm going to stay here. I don't know if I want to go to Andorra. It seems cold and in the mountains and a little isolated. But speaking of taco, speaking of races, before we leave this, the 150 cranked, what are your thoughts about this? Like, is this at some point, does it become too hard to corner or even descend? Because sure, you could run no cranks. You could be spinning the little tiny like baby cranks that like an actual baby would ride, but doesn't that keep your like when you extend your foot down in a turn, like there's no weight below the bottom bracket. Like as you raise that up, does that destabilize the bike?
I think it does destabilize the bike, but for a different reason. It's because for every centimeter that you're shortening your cranks, you're raising your saddle a commensurate amount. So
Yeah.
your center of gravity is becoming marginally higher. How big of a difference a centimeter makes in terms of your ability to corner and stay stuck to the road, I'm not quite sure. And it's really interesting as a consumer. A couple of things are clearly going to happen if this trend sticks. And bike designers are already talking about this. Colnago, for example, has publicly said, had we known that today and everyone was going to be moving to these much shorter cranks, they would have dropped the bottom bracket more on the bikes because that would have countered this effect that we're talking about. So you effectively would have stayed in the same position relative to the ground if you're dropping the bottom bracket a commensurate amount. So I have this feeling that if this trend sticks, and it seems like it's going to, although I think that we might be super forecasting something really important here, which is you're going to see more soft tissue injury. And I do think that we're going to start seeing more riders at the World Tour level out of competition because of patellar tendonitis or whatever. We're going to have to look into what the actual specific knee injury is that this might cause. Barring that, in the next 2 years, your road bike's going to be obsolete because they're going to come out with a new version of your road bike that has a lower bottom bracket to accommodate for the much shorter crank arms. The other thing I would say, like, I'm curious about experimenting with this. On the other hand, I think in the past 35 years of riding, I think I've accumulated 4, maybe 5 crank arm based power meters, and I'm not going to be replacing all of them. So, and cranks are not cheap. Like if you want to go out and replace, an Ultegra or higher level or Force or higher level crank set, you're talking like $700, I think. I mean, I know that that's pocket change for some of our Pinarello riding fans out there, but that's you're talking about a lot of dough if you want to do this across your entire stable of bikes. And even if you experiment with it, what kind of impact is that gonna making a change like that after you've been riding the same crank arm length for literally decades in my case, I'm not so sure that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer amount of power meters you've accumulated, you can't be making the switch. The problem, if what you're saying is true, they'll change the geometry. So if you ride a 175, you'll be scraping the ground every
Yeah,
time you go to
exactly.
the. But I
Yeah.
guess the fix would be to ride like a gravel bike because they can't lower them so much because they have to clear like single track. So I guess you could always just ride like a, I don't know, like a specialized crux as your road bike if you had to, if the bottom brackets got too low.
Well, it also does seem like I think we're going to start seeing 30s potentially being the road tire of choice for
Yes.
like normal road riding. So you're also going to have your bike's going to be slightly taller from running at 30 instead of if you're like me on 25 clincher gator skins trying to stay stuck to a road, which I don't recommend if you're on a rough mountain descent, as I learned out in Oakland over the
It does
past.
feel I run the same thing. I have my rim brake road bike has 25s and it does feel really hard. Like I don't know how I guess once you've experienced the other side, it's hard to go back. But
Yeah.
we'd have a friend, Jonathan Kaplan, was asking if he should get the Canyon Grail. And I was like, yeah, no brainer. I looked at the clearance, max clearance of 42. I'm like, that might be road bikes clearance in a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. Completely. It might be. Who knows? Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's funny too. Like, remember today went to the 165s and he's spinning 99 RPMs at 450 watts on these Alpine stages, dropping everybody. And then Visma, big brain in the offseason, was like, why'd you try to go to 165 when you can go to 150? Let's outshorten them. Let's skip some
Yeah.
steps. That could be
Yeah.
what's going on here. But we need to learn more about it. I'm gonna talk to some people at Visma, try to find out more about these cranks. But Andrew, before we leave, before you have a very important meeting with people we can't say, but it's important.
That's true.
Omloop Het Nieuwsblad tomorrow, kind of throws you off. Opening of the Flemish Classic season, and then Kern Brussels Kern on Sunday.
Yeah.
Kind of confusingly, Omloop is the more important race. It's the World Tour race with a slightly higher power start list. It's kind of like a mini Tour of Flanders, but with a flatter run into the finish. If you remember, Jan Tratnik won this last year after Visma swarmed the front. They had
Yeah.
everybody attacking. They won it the year before with Dylan Van Barl. They won it the year before that with Wout van Aert. So they've won it 3 years in a row. I guess on a bit, we don't need to go through, like, we don't need to closely preview this race, but just how are you feeling about Visma? I did the move with George
Yeah.
Hincapie and Johan Bernil last week, and they were a little defensive of their guys at Visma. My fear is that this race tomorrow is going to show us like UAE has surpassed them. Like UAE is the future is not only female, it's also UAE is my concern.
Yeah. I was thinking about early season 2024. It's just like unbelievable to think that this was the case a year ago, because I'm now reading all of these articles about how UAE is unstoppable. They're the new Team Sky 2012, whatever. Like they're just going to steamroll everyone all season. And if you think about the position Visma was in at the beginning of 2024 before Wout's injury, they were showing up. They had infinite optionality. They
Too many
had,
guys, remember? Too many
yeah,
guys. Yeah.
yeah, too many people who could win the race. And in fact, there was a great piece in Velo, actually. It was a Matteo Jorgensen interview talking about just this and why it's better to have multiple leaders, which I would say, like, yeah, if you have multiple people who are of that caliber who can win a race, like you can really make chaos, and it does put you in a fantastic position. And they have Camponerts on the roster this year for Omloop as well. So I mean, gosh, like what
He
a hit
honestly
squad.
could win this. This is like
Totally.
in the
Yeah.
same fashion Tratnik won
Yes.
last year. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
Campenarts could win this race.
Yeah, exactly. As I'm looking across the rest of the teams, I mean, like who do you see at UAE? Is it having a chance tomorrow?
So Antonio Morgado, guy got fifth as a teenager at
Oh my
Flanders
god.
last year. That's
Right.
unbelievable. This dude's a
Yeah.
stud.
Okay.
Niels Pollitt could win. That guy
Yep.
is a stud. Mikael Berg, he's strong. I don't know if he could win. This guy Rune
Yeah.
Hergehots, he was the last man leading out Pogacar on Jebel Jais at UAE Tour, super strong. Navarez, he's actually my favorite.
Yeah.
I think he
Yeah.
could win. Florian Vermeesch, the guy got third at Roubaix. The guy could
Yeah.
win. He was so strong at UAE. Tim Wellens could win. Everyone on their team
Right.
could feasibly win this race. Berg is the hardest to believe, but that guy's strong enough he could win. They have everyone on their roster could win. To me, this is modern cycling where it's the opposite of what you'd think. Like, remember when Jorgensen went to Wiesbaden?
Yeah.
And said, he's never going to get a chance. And then it actually turned out to be the best thing for his career, because the closer you get to the center of gravity in the universe in cycling, the better chance you have. Like Jasper Philipsen wouldn't have the classics career he has if he wasn't on Alpecin, because the focus on Van der Poel gives him a chance to win monuments like he did at
Right.
San Remo. Same thing with Navarez. You know, he was the
Yeah.
lone man at Ineos. If he was on Ineos, he'd be fighting for himself. He'd be fighting against these strong teams. Now he's bundled up close to, not Pogacar at this race, but Pogacar at some races. All the focus is on the other UAE riders. Navarez can win. Like, this is how you win in modern cycling. You get on the teams with the best guys. Everyone's distracted. Note on Wiesma, like, remember all these people we were talking about, like, how's it going to work with Van Barl? He's a star. Christophe Laporte, they're not here. Like,
Yeah.
it's like shocking to me how quickly that's all fallen apart for them.
Yeah. Okay. So I love a hot take. So my hot take for Omloop, it seems predetermined that someone from UAE or Visma will win. The rider I'm watching is Tom Scoins.
You know, he was really strong at this race last
Yeah.
year. Maybe
Yeah.
the strongest rider in the race.
So I could see some situation unfolding where we have a standoff between UAE and Visma. They're watching each other. Maybe they each have 2 or 3 riders in the winning move, and Scoins is right there, and somehow the door opens. He takes the opportunity and wins. I'd love to see something like that. Super long shot could happen. So that's my prediction. And then looking at KBK, wow. Oh,
Kind of
hold
a
on.
changing race, by the way. Used to be like a sprint every year, pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up. I'm just vamping. It's kind of changed, because then, like, Wout van Aert wins a tough race last year. Tej Minute wins the
Yeah.
year before, not necessarily a sprinter.
Okay. I've got my hot take. I'm ready.
Okay. What's your hot take for KBK?
All right. So I think, with all due respect, I think a lot of people have written off Casper Asgreen. I could see him pulling off the win here. It'll be like EF's, like, if like once every 2 years, 3 years, they get a win in a race like this. This could be the year.
I'm actually quite interested to see how he does. It's either, I mean, this is not revolutionary to say. He's either going to do really well there, or
Yeah.
you're never going to hear about him again. But think about Carapaz, right? Like, kind of down and out a little bit. Goes to
Yeah.
EF.
Yeah.
The guy was like on amazing form last year. So they can rehab these,
Yeah.
I guess, like sub light speed stars that are struggling a little bit. It's an interesting pick. I mean, another one, Red Bull. They have last year's winner, Tratnik. I don't see him repeating, but
No.
like Lascano, he could win. And then the guy that no one's talking about that is incredible right now, Jordi Meus. Is he? Yeah, he's racing KBK. I think he wins Kern Brussels Kern. This guy's really good. Remember, he won the Champs-Élysées sprint in 2023. He
Yeah.
was flying the last few weeks. He
Yeah.
only won one stage at Algarve, but he probably should have won stage 4. He's out of position. Keep an eye on him. But I'm just, on a larger point, like that sprint at Algarve, where it was the guy who won, Milan Frenton, kind of cut Van Aert's wheel. George Hincapie had a good point. Like, a fit Van Aert is not in a position to have his wheel chopped like that. I think he's maybe onto something. That time trial was pretty damn good, though.
Yeah.
Clearly fit if he can get within 11 seconds of Jonas Vingegaard on an uphill time trial. The other thing is, like, he had no team support at all whatsoever. Like, where is the rest of that team? And I know it's early, but I do think the sport's changing, where you rarely see people turn things around after the start of the season. It's kind of like where you start is where you are, because everyone starts at such a high level and then gets better. It's hard to overcome that.
Yeah. So I have to go in a second, but I would hate to leave without having a few more hot takes. With Remco on the sidelines, it's just wild to think we're entering this classic season and we're not really talking about Quick Step.
Yeah, they've kind of quietly ceded the Classics crown
Yeah.
because, I mean, partly like everyone just got old. They didn't recruit new ones. They do have Paul Mangier. Paul Mangier. The guy's really good. He's raced 4 times this year. He's finished first, second, third in DNF. He's 20 years old. Keep an eye on him. I don't think he's going to
Wow.
win. Kind of a tricky race to win at 20 years old, but that guy's really good. But yeah, I mean, they've just put all they've let their, what do they say in tech? We've let that product sunset. They've let the Classics team sunset, and then they focus on Remco for the GC. The risk of that is, what if Remco's not healthy? Then you're holding a lot of dead cap space basically while the Classics are happening and Remco's not there to race. What do we think about just on a larger note? You know, like Pogacar. Let's be honest, the guy's going to race Paris-Roubaix if he's healthy. Everyone's like, that's too dangerous. Okay, well, where do GC riders get injured in the last few years? Last year was Tour of the Basque Country, stage race. You wouldn't say that's that dangerous. Remco Evenepoel riding around by his house. I think like the injuries are like not happening at these big classics. I mean, they obviously can, but it seems like just leaving your house is most of the risk as a GC contender. But yeah, honestly, I'd kind of forgot about Remco until you just said his name right there. Not ideal for him to be sidelined. And it sounds like the recovery, everything's kind of fed through the Belgian filter when you read it. Sounds like it's not going incredible, I would say.
I mean, it's a horrific injury. I would hate to, man, I hate to even invoke this name. I won't do it. Nah, I'm not going to do it. Instead, I'm going to give you an, nah, I'm not going to do it. Instead, I'll have one more hot take, then I got to go. So on the last episode, I mentioned my theory. It's not a theory. I think that this might kind of be obvious on its face, but Milan really, I see him as the kind of rider that just absolutely has to have that lead out train. And I think we saw this at UAE Tour. He just like can't surf wheels on stage 6. You watch that finish. Merlier just comes out of the wheels and Milan gets swarmed. And I'm just wondering how he's going to do. And is he going to learn to surf, or is he going to keep getting?
I have an even hotter take. I think
All right.
Milan, not only is he not going to learn to surf, it's what is it like when you learn you don't have to dodge you won't have to dodge the bullets or whatever about he says to
Right.
Neo and the Matrix. He's just not even going to be a sprinter anymore. He's going to be
Yeah.
dropping people in the climbs. I'll just go to the line
Okay. All
myself.
right.
Why am I even bothering with this? I think he's going to be a classics man.
I
Like
think
he
you're
can
I
climb
think you're
so
right.
well.
Yeah.
It's like a Wout van Aert. Like, yeah, I sprint a little when I need to, but like I'm really a classics rider.
Yeah. My brain temporarily shut down. The name I was searching for as it relates to Milan was Marcel Kittel. Like that's the comparison I made.
Oh,
And it's just like, it's the same thing. Like the guy's got to be, he just needs a perfectly clean sprint with a clean lead out. And in the absence of that, he's not going to the line.
it's kind of an interesting thing you said. I know you got to go, but like in the sprints, they are similar. And Kittle was so good, such like a powerful sprinter. But
He
then
said
Milan
started his career as a time
was
trialist
a
as well.
contrast.
Yeah.
Remember, he just could not. He was like one of the worst climbers. Like, I don't. Now that I think about it, like, was that physio? Everyone's like, well, he's so big, he can't climb. It's like, well, could he have? Because Milan doesn't. Just
Yeah.
seems like,
He
well,
could
I have a
have.
really high threshold, so I can climb.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me wonder about Kittel in retrospect. That guy also was like, there's like a few documentaries with him in it. He was like, I think they would say in U.S. sports didn't have that dog in him. He just happened to be really fast, and if he got to the line with the clear shot, he was unstoppable. But didn't really seem like there was a good documentary where it almost seemed like the teammates were frustrated. Like John Degenkolb seemed frustrated with them for not
Yeah.
dialing in enough at the tour one year.
It's just too easy for this guy to win. All right. I really do have to go in
All
like
right.
30 seconds. I have a final question for you.
Super important meeting.
It is. This is one of the biggest meetings of the year. Phillipsen without the Matthew Van Der Poel lead out. Are we going to see him win again?
Nah, you will. Wait, but he will have you will not see him win this weekend. That's my prediction. When he gets Matthew back.
Without Matthew, are we going to see him winning sprints? Can
That's a
he
good
adapt?
question. I mean, I do think he's probably the sport's best Grand Tour sprinter. So it seems weird to say that he can't win without Vanderpool, but is it you couldn't argue that that's not the best lead out in the world, right?
Yeah.
So
All right.
it's not great. It's not great, Bob, if he doesn't have him. But yeah, I don't know. Interesting question, Andrew. Let's ruminate on that.
All right. And we'll see you all next week. You can follow me at Hardway Pod. DM me if you want to reach out. It was great to hear from Tim Woods this week with his thoughts on Taco. And please check out my Substack. It's Choose the Hard Way on Substack or alwaysthehardway.substack.com.
Trying to figure out what Andrew's boy taco was the highlight of my week. So thank you for bringing that over. All right, we will talk next week.